What's up, Liron here, and today we're gonna do something we don't do much of, and that is swatching. So here I have a dot card of paints by St. Petersburg's White Knights brand. I got these from the IWS exhibition I took part in. Every participating artist got this dot card, and you can see here, International Watercolor Society. So I'm really excited about these because I have already a couple of paints by St. Petersburg. They're really good here in Israel because they're cheap, easy to get, and very good quality. I love the way these look on the paper and behave. So this is a good opportunity for me to try out some more paints and figure out what I want to add to my collection, because I already have maybe 3 or 4 pans of this paint, and this will be a good chance for me to test these out on this paper that I got prepared here. I have all the paints, all their information. With that being said, let's get started and swatch these. So I have the swatches here, I have the dot card here. Now I wanted to show you before we get started, I still have this Madder Lake red light. I also have it here. You're going to see me swatch it here, Madder Lake red light. So I have this pen unopened yet, still haven't touched it. And aside from that, I also have this. This is golden. You'll also see that later on. And I also have here blue, which I think is just phthalo blue. Okay, so let's get started. And I thought I'd rotate the dot page to start with the more interesting paints. So we'll start with the SAP Green, and I want to try and make, with all of these, a bit of a gradual change from light to dark, but I don't want this to be a too boring of a just swatching video, so I will keep it, I think, rather brief. I also am not one of these people that have to be perfectionistic in how they fill in the swatch. It's just swatches after all, it's just good fun. But what I do want to attempt to show you is the variation in value. So I'm going to try and start very light and then go darker and darker. The reason for that is that it will give you a better understanding of the range that a paint can achieve, and it will also give me a better understanding of that range, which is really important, because for me that's the one thing I always look at. I want a paint to be versatile, as versatile as possible, meaning I can produce a lot of different values with it. I can get it to look as dark as I want, as light as I want, and doing these quick swatches with trying to get a variety of values from light to dark is also a good practice when it comes to controlling how dark the paint is, controlling the movement of the paint, how much water to use, how much paint. So now we're going to continue with cobalt blue, and you can see all of the paint information here. So this is PB28, which I believe is cobalt blue. The SAP Green is a composition of several pigments, which is not as preferable. You'd prefer to use single pigments, and I'm actually quite surprised. Well, SAP Green, you know what? I take that back. I'm not surprised. SAP Green, I believe also Daniel Smith's SAP Green is composed of multiple colors. It's like 2 or 3. So yeah, so this is why I personally, as you know, prefer to mix my own greens and not rely on convenience mixtures, what you'd call, and using, pre-made SAP Green. And the likes, I prefer to mix my own. And by the way, you can see how hard it is to produce a dark value with this. This won't get too dark very easily. But in any case, I love to mix my own greens. I use blue and yellow on the paper purely, trying to make them mix on paper, I think, is a much more attractive effect than getting this unified, even boring green. So I ran through the entire dot. As you can see, this is the last dot that's actually in the frame. I ran through the entire thing, and this is as dark as I can get this to be. So this is probably a blue I won't get. It may be beautiful, it may work well in terms of mixing, but I need to have my blues especially be able to achieve darkness, because otherwise I can't rely on them for the shadows. That's my problem. So now we have cadmium red light, PR108, which I believe is cadmium red. And this one should get quite light, and you can see here, well, you can't on the swatch, but I'm going to show you here. You can see this is a very strong, fiery, a bit orangey red, has a lot of warmth to it. And this is the type of reds that I love, because I love these, and I hope you don't hate me for really messing the shape of the swatches. I was never one, again, to really be accurate. I may try to be a little more accurate with the next ones. I can promise you I'll be accurate with the zinc white,
because you just won't see it. So yeah, but this one, the cadmium red light should get quite dark. I love cadmiums and these types of reds, but you do have to know how to work with them, because sometimes they create really ugly mixes if you use certain colors. Now I'm gonna move this palette that I put here aside. I don't really need it. And now let's pick up some of that zinc white. Hopefully I don't have much red left in the brush. And as you can see, it is indeed white. As far as I know, to get an effect of strong opaque white, zinc white isn't the best option. I believe titanium white is better. Even buff titanium, I believe, straight out of the tube will get you a very nice effect if you want to get highlights and stuff like that. The buff titanium is great for that because it's not just a boring white. It actually has a bias towards, I think, warm bias, but I'm not sure. So that's that for the first row. Now we move on to the Burnt Sienna. And the Burnt Sienna, this is interesting. It's just pigment brown 7. So I believe it's more similar to, it should be, in theory, more similar to Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna, but as far as I can tell, so far it's quite orangey. So I do have to wonder how they got it to be this orange if it is pigment brown. I don't know. If you have an answer to that, that'll be good. This really looks more like it even reminds me of the quinacridone Burnt Orange by Daniel Smith. So it's much more orangey and much less like the actual Burnt Sienna by Daniel Smith, at least from what I can remember. And I actually have it here so we can compare if you want to. Let's bring it here. Let's make this interesting. So I'm gonna use a lot of it just so that we can see its full manifestation. But then if you look at it, it's a bit challenging to get a very dark value with it. But then, if we look at Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna, which I got right here, it's much more, and we're just going to clean it off from the contaminated section. I don't know if it's just my imagination, or it looks much more brown to me. This one looks more brown, and even if you compare their visuals, they look very different. Let me show you here. I know it's not a full comparison because my tape is yellow, but this is really different. So I may be mistaken about the composition of the Burnt Sienna by Daniel Smith. Maybe I don't remember what it is, and it's actually a different one and not a pigment brown. So anyways, next up we have cerulean blue, and I love how these swatches become more and more beautiful the more you fill them. Now, my personal problem, my beef with cerulean blue, first off, they call it ceruleum blue. And as far as I know, ceruleum is a power source from Final Fantasy video games, but they call it ceruleum. It's not a misspelling by my side. That's what they wrote here. So that's probably a mistake on their side. It's not, and it's supposed to be cerulean. But in any case, my beef with cerulean blue is that it's usually, not always, but usually, for me at least, I find that it's hard to produce, again, a dark value. This is why I love to rely more on the French ultramarine or ultramarine or phthalo blue, which is hard to work with sometimes, but at least it gives you the strong value you need. This is my only issue with these kinds of paints. So now, next up we have Meadow Lake Red Light, which is the one that I showed you. I have in a pan right here. What I will say is that I chose this pen on purpose because notice how strong it is. Again, I love these kinds of strong colors. And I knew it, and I looked online and I tested it out and I looked at some brochures to make sure that I get the right paint. This is the type of reds that I like. This is the type of, like, these two could create a beautiful palette together. Then you have a warm, a cool, and this is really more of what I care about, the temperature, much more than the actual color. The color doesn't matter as much. It's more really about the values, and I'll keep repeating that probably forever. Color has its importance, but it's not as important. Cadmium yellow medium, okay, this is PY35. I don't know which, I never remember the yellow pigments, so I can't really remember what this one is. But I did see that this isn't the most commonly used yellow. I'm going to show you in just a moment a bit of a more commonly used yellow that's also really recommended. But this is a single pigment, which is good because some of their yellows are not. They're composed of a couple, which isn't necessarily bad. A lot of brands do that. So next up we have, let's move on with this swatching. We have a Burnt Umber. So this is, and here's the interesting thing. The Burnt Umber is also pigment brown 7. So it's the exact same, in theory, pigment as Burnt Sienna, but they won't look the same. And this is strange to me. And even if you look at the dot card, they look really different. I'm gonna hold it up later on so you can see. That's still a mystery to me, because the Burnt Umber looks a little more gray and brown, as it should, really. But for some reason, it says this is the exact same pigment brown 7. So if anyone can solve that mystery, that'll be good. Wow, my swatches are so messy. But you know, I've never been one to. You can say that these are impressionistic swatches and not swatches that aspire to be realistic. If that helps you get through it. Now this is indigo, so this is quite the paint. There's a lot here. We have pigment black 7, pigment blue 15, which I forgot what it was. I believe it's phthalo blue? No, I don't remember. And pigment violet 55, so quite the composition. These two, by the way, look really good together. I have to say these two pigments work so well in unity. I really like these. And the indigo is very useful for monochromatic work. I don't like the way it mixes with other paints, so for me, it won't be a part of my basic palette. But I will admit it's really good for monochromatic work, and you can work with these two probably together quite well. Actually, I'm curious. Let's try mixing them up a bit and see what we get. We should get a nice little muted gray. So yeah, that's a nice combination. It's a bit of a green because this is biased towards yellow a bit more, but you get a nice interesting result. I think it would be an interesting option to explore this combination of these two and to base just monochromatic work off of these. Next up we have quinacridone rose, classic, beautiful paint. Pigment red 122. I'm not sure what it is. I know that the Daniel Smith quinacridone rose is more similar to pigment violet 15, I believe, which I don't think we'll have here. Oh yeah, we have it on ultramarine violet, so we'll get to see it in just a moment. But I love these as well because, again, notice they're very strong and very useful for creating dark shadows that are more biased towards this rose paint. And if you look at this, the transition between all of the reds, I really like it. I would only probably need 2 of these, and probably these two, not this one. This one is really, really rose. I mean, it's essentially pink, but it is beautiful. So I would happily use that as well in my paintings. A bit brighter. You could do probably some nice bright skin tones with it, and it's transparent, by the way, which encourages me to maybe get one. These two are transparent, as it seems. So I would consider, and this one, the cadmium, this one's opaque. So I would consider probably getting this as a part of a primary set, because I love transparency lately, and I'm trying to do more of that. Now we have yellow ochre. This is pigment yellow 43, which is very common. I see it a lot, and pigment yellow 1. Both of these are quite common. Now I'm gonna try and really dig deep and get it to be as dark as it can. I like the ochres that are very strong right out the gate, usually, and I do find that a lot of ochres don't have that. They're a little weak. Which is too bad. I have no problems with the more opaque ones. You know, as much as I want to try out more transparent paints, I have no problem with the really, really opaque ochres. I actually love them, and it's an aspect of yellow ochre that I enjoy, especially for landscapes. It's just good to be able to get it to be as dark as you can, really quickly. It's a very useful thing to have when working from direct observation outside when you don't have too much time. Next up we have Sepia here. Sepia is always, I find, it's a composition of many paints. This one is quite gray, so we have here pigment red 102, pigment red 187, and then pigment black 7. It's an interesting combination, and again it mystifies me a bit, because this has to be grayed out somehow. This isn't red, so I don't know exactly how they achieve it. Now I can already tell you that this paint will be excellent for monochromatic work, because notice how easily I can darken it. This is semi-transparent, I think, or semi-opaque. I'm not sure what they call these. We will look at that later on in just a moment. But it is really good. I don't mind the opacity when I work monochromatically. All I care about is getting the right value. So here we have blue. This is essentially phthalo blue. So PB15, 6. I forgot what 6 is. It could be red shade, or it could be green shade, yellow shade. I'm not sure, but I'll check it out later on, and you'll probably correct me as well in the comments. What I absolutely love about the phthalo blues is their strength. It's usually their strong staining. This one is, by the way, transparent, which is interesting. I think they are mostly transparent, which is why they're preferable, really. Transparent, strong value, strong pigmentation. This is beautiful. I could do so much with this paint, which is why I always have a phthalo on my palette for the most part. Now ultramarine violet, PV15, which will be close to what I said earlier. I meant PV16, I believe. But we'll see how that one looks. Yeah, so this is much more muted. It reminds me of the carbazole violet, but this one is really different because it immediately you can tell that you can't get to the same value. Like the one thing carbazole violet has is that it gets dark super fast. This one's definitely not that. Still a beautiful paint though. And you can see I really dig through. You can barely see, but I finished the entire dot really, and this is as dark as I can get it to be, so not as useful as I wanted to. Next up we have Indian red, which is a paint I like based on the visuals, but I don't always, depending on my mood and what I'm after, I may not like the way it handles, but looks wise I really like how it's a warm yellow, and this one is it's beautiful. I could really imagine immediately sunflowers. This is the thing I would love to paint with it. And another plus is that it is quite strong. It can get quite strong. Okay, as you can see here, it can be quite dark. Unlike the cadmium yellow medium, which we really had to struggle with, and also the yellow ochre. With this one, you don't really need to struggle. It's beautiful. It's really similar, in my opinion, to nickel azo yellow, just based on appearance, not how it handles or anything like that. So next up we have a color that's also supposedly really good for monochromatic work, and that is Payne's Gray. I see a lot of monochromatic work done with these. Sorry about that slight yellow bias. I'm going to get rid of that now. As much as you clean the brush, you always have a bit of that. But I think now it's safe to say we got rid of it. Yep. So here you can see it. It is a beautiful color, and it is really good for working, again, I think, monochromatically, as long as it can have this huge value range. So this is pigment black 7, pigment blue 15, which is this one we had earlier, pigment violet 55. So they seem to be using the same pigments in several mixes. Let's see how dark we can get this one to be, because we should be able to get it to be quite dark. Yeah. And now I'm going to add just a bit of water here around the top, and maybe a bit more of a strong value here. This could probably get a little darker still, just because there's a lot of water on the paper. So next up we have a paint I don't think I ever got to try, chromium oxide, pigment green 17. I think that's similar to Schminke's olive green. This is probably, and I said this when I reviewed it before, and I love Schminke, I love St. Petersburg, but this paint I hate. I don't know why. It's quite similar to Perylin. I said red, this green. I hate this. It is quite similar to Perylin green, but I don't know why. The Perylin has a bit more of a dull gray feel to it, and this for some reason I just don't like. I don't know why this. What they call olive green, I really dislike it. I would choose SAP Green every day for a base or a convenience mixture, but that's really just my personal preference, and I'm happy to say that I'm pretty consistent on that one. I hate this color. So yeah, ultramarine. So this should be a good one. Pigment blue 29, classic ultramarine paint. a bit of a warmer blue. Really useful, really versatile, good for many things. I believe I have a pan of this paint, and I find it to be really good. And as you can see, it can get quite dark. So this is what I like about their ultramarine. Better than some other brands that I tried, it can get quite dark. M. Graham's also can get quite dark, which I love. So yeah, this one is a good one. The difference between their ultramarine and their sort of phthalo isn't as striking as in Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith phthalo blue is really strong. It's much more vibrant than this. It's actually similar to the more oil types of phthalo blues that you'll find. But I guess this is golden. This is a paint I'm used to. I already have it, as I mentioned here, on my plein air palette. It is useful. The only problem with this and with some other paints here, by the way, and I haven't talked about this, and you do have to take this into consideration, is not all of them are light fast. And I believe this one has a medium light fastness, what they call, or maybe, oh, you know what? Maybe they improved their formula. So this says it has high light fastness. Interesting, because when I got the pen, it didn't. So that's really interesting. I'll have to look into that. So maybe they renewed the formula here. From what I can see, you know what? Actually, other than yellow ochre and what else? All of these are light fast. I can see, and indigo and yellow ochre. The rest are pretty light fast. So I take that back. But yeah, that's interesting. So maybe they're doing improvements, which is a good sign always. And I think with that, we're finished with the swatching. Let me zoom out a bit and show you everything together. So here is everything, and the right way of looking at it is actually this way, because I decided I didn't want to start out with the order, but actually I wanted to break this and make it a little more interesting so that we have the yellows, the reds. Maybe it was a mistake, I don't know. I actually like the way it looks here as well. Just didn't want to bore you with white and then yellow, orange. But in any case, I love the way these look. Here you get to see some more information about them. So this is the highlight fastness, medium, low, opaque, semi-transparent, and transparent. You can pause the video and read this if you want to. Plus, you can pause the video and look at all of the information on the actual paints. I hope you enjoyed this one. I will think that if I may add something to my repertoire, let's see what it'll be. I liked the cadmium red, you know, that's an obvious choice. Maybe quinacridone rose, I really liked that. The Indian yellow is beautiful. I may consider that. Ultramarine and blue I already knew. So it doesn't change much. Maybe SAP Green for plein air just to get a quicker mix. And Burnt Sienna. I actually love all of these. Perhaps in the future I'd want to try out more gray ones for monochromatic work. But overall I like all of these, and I'll probably go by what's fully light fast and more transparent in some cases. So this is it. Now we can wrap up the video.
So this is it. I hope you enjoyed swatching with me. Again, something we don't do as much. I actually wanted to ease my way into going back to the full schedule and working and doing these YouTube videos. So I decided to go with something that for me is a bit easier. The next video is going to be a painting process, so we're going back to business for real. And I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to give it a like if you have, and subscribe if you still haven't. I have tons of videos like this one, tutorials, reviews of paints, of artists, of everything. And I will see you again in another vid real soon.